Sexual liberation has confused the average woman into thinking that there is something empowering, utopian, and morally upstanding in the promiscuous lifestyle.
Today, my whole life could change, and I'm scared. Friday night, I started having a burning sensation whenever I peed. Was not pleasant. So Saturday, I went to urgent care, and they put me on medication for a UTI. So I started the UTI medication on Sunday, and then that night I noticed that my right lymph node in my groin was swollen. By Monday, the UTI meds still haven't kicked in. It still really hurt whenever I peed. So I called to make an appointment with my gyno. And it's now Wednesday. My appointment's in like half an hour. This subject is very stigmatized, has a lot of shame around it. But then I noticed warts on my genitals. Very, very painful. These last few days, I've just felt run down, icky, haven't had an appetite, uncomfortable. It hurts to walk. It hurts to sit. Everything hurts. I'm scared. If it's herpes, I know it's not the end of the world. I'm about to go to my appointment now, so I will come back with an update.
Momentarily, we are going to find out what is going to happen to our fellow human being here. But what's interesting to me is we rarely look at promiscuity from this lens, from this perspective of, fundamentally health and the risks that are associated with it. Much talk is about the freedom to be able to engage fully and wholeheartedly in sexual expression, but it's sobering videos like the one that you've just watched that really put into perspective the harsh and brutal reality of consequence. What's humorous to me is, especially in this era where everybody's so self-obsessed with health and nutrition, to the point where there are select groups that kind of bound together and make their tents and their camps around this idea that only certain foods get access to my body, where in actual fact I believe that who you let into your body and whose body you go into should be higher on your agenda, or at least equal to that of what you're putting in your mouth. And here's the thing, I know for a fact that men are not free of blame here. I know that perhaps on the surface and perhaps the marketing of this video, in fact, it may seem that I'm coming from this perspective that women are the sole perpetrators of this particular dis-ease in the sexual marketplace, the modern sexual marketplace. But I do not think men are blameless. I certainly don't think they're blameless. And I think that in many ways, men should be more considerate of how overzealous they may be acting in this particular time.
I have herpes. If I want to have unprotected sex, I have to tell them. I don't know how this is going to affect my dating life. I can't give birth vaginally if I have an outbreak. I don't know. I don't fucking know how I'm supposed to tell my parents this. It's also just fucking painful. And I'm gonna have these outbreaks for the rest of my life. I feel like my parents are gonna be so disappointed in me. I don't know.
Look, I'm going to be real with you here. My initial reaction to this video is one of compassion, right? To see another human being that has unfortunately suffered the consequences of reality, which I can't say the same for the comments in this video, which I'll share some of them a little bit later, which can be controversial, and also some I might disagree with or agree with, so we'll get to that in just a moment. But this is somebody whose sexual life has fundamentally been changed forever now. Herpes is an STI, sexually transmitted infection, or STD, whereby there is no known cure. It's going to fluctuate in when it starts to appear more aggressive and when it isn't. And yeah, she's correct. She needs to inform every single person she's going to be intimate with that she has herpes, because of how contagious it can be, and for this to keep going and going and going and facilitating. So she's going to have to bear the brunt of responsibility here, which I can't stop myself from saying she should have done prior to engaging in promiscuous relations. And I know in this video, perhaps it wasn't delineated by this particular woman that this was a consequence of a promiscuous lifestyle. It may have been her boyfriend, but I would have hoped that her boyfriend would have had the presence of mind, or any long-term partner would have had the presence of mind to communicate that, hey, before we do this, this is my particular condition, this is what may happen, and are you fundamentally okay with that? Because the answer would be a resounding no. Most human beings have a disgust reflex to these kinds of things for a fundamental reason. So the premise of this video really is about this idea that sexual liberation has convinced women that promiscuity is something to be celebrated, is something that's morally upstanding. It is part and parcel of the utopia of the modern world nowadays, and we should feel no guilt, no shame, and no blame, and no responsibility towards our actions in this particular sexual landscape. And then stories like this happen, sobering stories where you recognize that it is ill-informed, it's inadvisable to start to perpetuate this kind of behavior into the modern landscape, because it's going to fundamentally ruin how people interact with maybe their long-term, maybe their husbands, maybe their wives, and that's going to be something that is never going away in the context of this particular individual here. I wanted to share with you some of the comments on or underneath, pardon me, this particular video, which kind of paused me to think as well. I'm curious about what you gentlemen feel about these particular opinions here. So the first one is that I don't think this is funny or necessarily means that she was sleeping around. I did make note of that. One of my friends in high school got this from her boyfriend, who she was with for several years. Maybe he was sleeping around, but she wasn't. I felt really bad for her. So that's a really important point to bring up here, is I don't believe that the individual that gave this to her is blameless. He's got to hold some kind of responsibility, or she, don't know what particular persuasion she is, but he or she needs to hold some accountability in relation to informing and advising their partner in respects to their particular dis-ease. So there's always a risk whenever you're sharing fluids with people. That's why I believe this is a particular sacred act, and we should be more cautious and tread lightly whenever these kind of relations are concerned, and try not to succumb to our primal animalistic lust and carnality, because hindsight is 2020 there. Am I the only one who finds this sad? Society has lied to everybody about the consequences of sex outside marriage. Yeah, I might start to, or be at risk here of being a hypocrite, but I'm not entirely sure that sex only within the confines of a marital agreement is the solution here. I think there are very strong arguments for it, don't get me wrong. I mean, I know marriage success goes up in terms of mitigating the risk of divorce and infidelity and adultery within the dynamics of the relationship if sex is only confined to marriage. And typically that would mean that your first ever partner would be your wife, who would be your husband. But I don't think that's particularly living in the modern world, and I think you're asking a lot for people to overcome their very carnal and primal and animalistic natures. I think we can certainly aim for a point where there is intimacy or exclusivity, and intimacy within the confines of a long-term monogamous relationship. I wish we could eliminate infidelity, promiscuity, adultery completely, but perhaps that's wishful thinking on my part here. But I think we need more examples like this that are a risk to the individual, because it's more a consequence on the self, where they're going to have to pay for their particular transgressions, I guess. She's afraid to tell her parents she has herpes, but has no problem telling the world. That is social media 101 nowadays. Liberal sex culture doesn't even talk about the permanent viral infections from sex, because they want everybody to believe there are zero consequences to the free love lifestyle. Young people suffer the most. It used to be discussed regularly when I was growing up. Yeah, I started this video saying that. Couldn't have put it better myself, Craig, that this idea of like STDs, sexually transmitted infections and diseases, STIs and Ds, diseases, infections, are something that we should be more sensitive towards. I mean, I think it comes under the rubric of health fundamentally. I think promiscuity is unhealthy. Like, it's unhealthy. Like eating junk food and seed oils, it's not going to do well for your internal holistic health. It's going to be damaging long term. And I think the healthiest people are individuals that are monogamous and faithful to their monogamous relationships. And those who are promiscuous, you can see in the same vein as you can a greedy, obese man gorging himself on food. You're unfit, you're unhealthy, and you're disease ridden. I have to tell my partner before unprotected sex. No, you have to tell every partner before any sex. Yes, that's correct, considering how contagious herpes are. There are so many reasons why having a lifelong partner is practical. This isn't liberation. Yeah, they sold you a lie. They sold you liberation under the guise of, sexual freedom. But it's condemning. It's condemning you. Society needs to rewind 70 years. I certainly think our traditional values there were more conducive to less disease and more faith and more relationship satisfaction. I definitely think if you were going to do a survey comparatively to 70 years ago, there would be a higher related relationship satisfaction in those 70 prior years than now. But what is the antidote for me? I mean, it's certainly, I like the idea of maybe we can aim for exclusivity of sex within the monogamous relationships, but it might be wishful thinking because we can't even guarantee exclusivity and intimacy under the rubric of marriage. And I think the answer might lay in education of more consequences such as this one, and even financial ramifications for individuals that break the integrity of marriage. I'm not sure if that's actually a law. If an individual is found culpable or guilty of infidelity within the confines of marriage, does it nullify them to the financial assets of their partner? If so, why not? I think those shouldn't be theories. I think those should be facts. Let me know what you think. Speak soon.